Week 2 of the fantasy playoffs is here. You are one step closer to bringing home that fantasy football championship this year. We are going to help you decide who to start and who to sit in the second most crucial game of the year, because obviously the championship is. Welcome into today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Lucas Wenzel, Tyler Plath joining you on this fine Wednesday evening. We got a lot of matchups covered tonight, Ty. I would ask you a nice introductory question here, but with no teams on bye, with matchups as important as ever, I really don't want to waste people's time. I kind of want to just dive on in and get started with these matchups, because this is important for you and I, who are both on the verge of going to the championship in multiple leagues that we're in this year.
It took me an hour to get through all of these last week, just myself. So now with two people, we are gonna have to crank this one out.
We got a lot of work cut out for us, but good thing we're built different. That was too cheesy. Let's transition into the starts and stits for every week 16 matchup for fantasy football.
Starts and stits, huh?
I know. I said it. I almost reset it, and then I didn't. And
just try to push through it.
Everybody can give me flack in the comments. It's late at night. We're cranking this out.
The beauty of doing it on your own is that you can just push through mistakes like that. But when you've got someone else doing it with you,
right,
and they're your best bud, they're just going to call it out every single time. So you can't avoid it.
Only because I throw it out, so I got to be able to take it too. I throw it out way too much. So let's dive on in. We got plenty of matchups. We got Thursday games, we got Saturday games, we got Sunday and Monday football. Happy holidays to you all, by the way. How did I not start the episode with that? I'm not even in a holiday spirit, am I?
I was going to say, no, you're not.
Winning championships, and I didn't even wish the people happy holidays, because this is the last time you're going to hear from us until. Well, I don't even think we're doing an episode next week, because it's Christmas on Monday.
Christmas on Monday. I didn't tell you this, but I was thinking I could go live before kickoffs on Saturday. So you can join me then. But until then, I mean, the next time that we would see you is on Wednesday, probably.
Unless if we do a Tuesday morning recording, which might be possible. We'll see how we all feel, yeah. But TBD. But anyways, let's dive on in. We got plenty of games on the holiday weekend here. Let's start Thursday Night Football. The New Orleans Saints, they visit the Los Angeles Rams. In this game, I feel like there's three very obvious starts. You're starting Kyren Williams, who has been an absolute unit since his return. You're starting Cooper Kupp as well, who has also been fairly good as of recent, turning it back on. And you're starting off Kamara, who has just been phenomenal since he returned in week 4. Really, the only guys that you're debating between in this game are Chris Olave and Puka Nacua. And frankly, I think I'm more willing to start Chris Olave than Puka Nacua. Who would you rather play this week? We'll get into more details, but I think those are the two that we're talking about here.
I mean, for me, it's definitely Chris Olave. I feel like they both have relatively the same ceiling this week, but Olave is going to give you the safer floor because he really is the only guy besides Alvin Kamara versus Puka, who is fighting against Kyron's carries and Cooper Kupp at this point.
And I was shocked as I was doing some digging into this. New Orleans, they've been allowing the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers in the second half of the season here since week 10. Now he's seen 7+ targets in every game this year, so you could just say, well, volume, but that hasn't always equated to fantasy relevance for Puka. He'll see 7 targets, but he'll still only have 50, 60 receiving yards in some of those games, and in PPR, half PPR formats, 9 fantasy points just isn't going to cut it for you on a majority of weeks. So I 100% agree. The Rams 8th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers since week 10. And here you go. Most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers lined up out wide since week 10. The Los Angeles Rams have allowed. They have been getting torched on the perimeter. Now, Chris Olave, 25th in slot snaps this year. But still, if you're thinking about a long shot guy like Rashid Shaheed, he might be worth a dart throw this week. If you're doing any Thursday night showdowns, I think I'm throwing Rashid Shaheed in quite a few lineups there. If you're doing any of that over with our friends at Underdog Fantasy, promo code fellas. Tyler Higbee, I think he's another guy maybe we're talking about. I'm not excited to stream him. I take that back. He's really not worth talking about, is he?
I guess because the matchup is kind of there because New Orleans does allow quite a few points to tight ends, but he's fighting again. He's fighting if Puka is fighting against Kyron and Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee is then fighting against those two and Puka on top of it. So it's dicey, I think.
I just like his projection at 22.5 receiving yards on Underdog. I just
like
I just like the pick-a-mentary on that. Separate the two, Lucas. They're not the same. Let's move on to Saturday games then, because we do have two. The first one will be the Cincinnati Bengals visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers in AFC North divisional showdown late in the season. You know this one is going to be fought in the trenches. That's how these AFC North games always work late in the season. You're firing up Joe Mixon. He has been hot. He has been red hot since the team's bye. You're firing up T. Higgins. He's the wide receiver one now. Jamar Chase going to be out this week. I think he is an obvious start this week. You fire him up. Let's talk about, I think most of our questions are going to come from the Steelers side of the football, though, because that's primarily the Bengals players that you're for sure locking in. But let's talk about the pass catchers over for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, because Cincinnati has been getting torched by wide receivers since week 10. Fourth in fantasy points allowed, eighth most out wide, fourth most to receivers in the slot. They've allowed the fourth most yards per reception, the fifth most receptions, and the most receiving yards to wideouts. However, quarterback situation, fairly dicey here. Fairly dicey. Do you want to play either of them this week?
I think I've got some kind of flex value or consideration for Deontay Johnson because he's been the wide receiver getting it done recently. But I mentioned this on the waiver video that I do every single Monday. It just a shameless plug. I honestly, I was talking about Zay Jones, and I was like, at this point in the season, Zay Jones is worth rostering over George Pickens at this point. He has only one finish higher than the wide receiver 44. And let me count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in his last 8 games. So like George Pickens is like you can't play him ever for the rest of the season. Deontay Johnson, maybe just a little bit of a flex consideration, but I just remember this. It's not even Mitch Trubisky. It's not even Kenny Pickett. It's Mason Rudolph. Right. So It's like, I feel like it's a volatile pick for Deontay this week, even.
It's a volatile pick. That's a good word to use because on the one hand, I see the matchup and I say, yes, fire up Deontay Johnson. I love him this week, but you want to know who I don't want throwing to my wide receivers in a week 16 gotta win matchup? It's Mason Rudolph. He's one of the last guys I would want throwing my players the football in a crucial week 16 matchup. So I think, Deontay could be an interesting flex guy. I'm definitely not playing George Pickens. How about let's talk about the running back impact of that, though, because I think Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren could be the focal points of this offense with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. Cincinnati, I mean, their defense has just been struggling second half of the season. 9th most fantasy points allowed to running back since week 10, 4.6 yards per carry, 8th most rush yards. They've given up 6 rushing touchdowns. That is tied for the most in the league. I think you're good to play either of them. Do you agree or disagree?
The tough part is that I just can't figure out which is going to be the running back to play because Jaylen Warren seems to be the more explosive. He's got the receiving upside, but it's been Najee Harris as of late before week 15, I should say, because it was all Jaylen Warren in week 15. But before that, it was Najee Harris in the lead role. So it was like, well, what good is Jaylen Warren at that point? So I don't know. I can understand an argument. I just would rather not try to bet on a Steelers running back in week 2 of the fantasy playoffs, but I get that you may be in that spot and you may have to just
Yeah.
because that's how bad running backs have been this year.
Well, well, that's exactly it. That's how bad running backs have been this year, where I think a lot of managers are going to be looking at either of these two as potentially their running back too. Now, we may get the likes of Jonathan Taylor back this week, Josh Jacobs back this week. So maybe managers won't be in as much trouble, but I'm sure a lot of them last week were thinking, man, you know what? I might be in a spot where I have to play them. And especially in a matchup like this against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I will say, in terms of the receiving game, the Bengals have allowed only 142 receiving yards to running backs since week 10. That is 25th. So if you do the math, that would be the 8th fewest since week 10. Now, whether that impacts Najee Harris or Jalen Warren more TBD, but I think I prefer the explosiveness and efficiency of Jalen Warren to Najee Harris if you're going to make a tiebreaker there.
I mean, because you're essentially banking on touchdowns from Najee Harris, right? So it's then a question of like, does Pittsburgh move the ball well enough to get Najee into those situations? I don't really think so. And I think that favors Jalen Warren just kind of by elimination, I guess you could say.
Jake Browning, what do you want to do with him this week? He has been absolutely phenomenal as of late. And look, the Steelers definitely have been buttoned up against quarterbacks second half of the season. They're about middle of the pack, but Jake Browning, man, he has been too hot as of late.
Yeah, and this is the same Pittsburgh defense that just gave up a little over 200 passing yards with 3 touchdowns to Gardner Minshew without Michael Pittman Jr. So it's not like this is a complete like shutdown matchup for Jake Browning. And I think what he's been able to do as of late, I think you could still play him, but you may not be able to expect like the 20, 24 point outings that we've been seeing. But if he gives you 18, that's still pretty good. And that's still, I mean, that's been a top 12 quarterback this year. So,
well, and yeah, with the landscape of quarterbacks right now, with how many of them have been injured or still struggling with injury, CJ Stroud, still may not play this week, just for an example. Yeah, I mean, Jake Browning, 32 for 354 and 25.7 fantasy points, added a rushing touchdown in week 13. 18 for 275 and 2, another rushing touchdown in week 14 for 24.7. And then last week against the Vikings, 29 for 324 and 2, 20 fantasy points on the week. Yeah, I think you can play Jake Browning this week if you need to. How about Tyler Boyd? I feel like he's more of a 14-man league flex play, deep league, multiple flex spot play this week. I don't think I'm forcing him into a standard 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex lineup. But if you have multiple flexes or you're in a 14-man plus league, I think I'd be looking Tyler Boyd's direction this week.
I think this really comes down to Jake Browning, and as good as he has been, I don't know if Browning is a guy that's going to be able to support both T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And Pittsburgh has been pretty decent against wide receivers the last couple weeks. So, I was thinking as you were talking about Tyler Boyd, I was like, oh, would I rather play Deontay Johnson or Tyler Boyd this week? And I would lean to Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would lean Deontay Johnson over Tyler Boyd. I think that's about where you're going to be looking in most leagues. And I agree. I would lean Deontay Johnson there. Let's keep it moving, though. We got to keep it moving here. We got a lot more games to cover. The second Saturday game, the Buffalo Bills take on the Los Angeles Chargers. You're firing up Josh Allen. Despite Diggs' struggles, he's not a guy you bench in the fantasy playoffs. You cannot do that. I know it's been bad, but Diggs is a guy you don't bench under any circumstances. Same with Keenan Allen. If he's active and playing this week, you fire him up. He has been the most targeted tight end, the most targeted wide receiver, the wide receiver with the most receptions in the NFL before he sat out in week 15. You fire up James Cook. My gosh, if he had a game like he did last week against the Dallas Cowboys, you absolutely have to play him the following week. And look, the Chargers' second most fantasy points allowed to running back since week 10. So you're firing up James Cook. Great matchup for him. And I know Austin Eckler has been bad, but man, he, again, just a guy you cannot bench at this point in the season. Unless if you're somehow loaded at the running back position and you can afford to sit Austin Eckler, I don't know who you are, how you did such a thing, but I think you have to play Austin Eckler this week as well. Do you agree with that? Because I think Eckler is a hot take one at this point where people are really panicking about him and they're really not sure if you can trust him.
I think part of the reason why we're panicking is just because it's the name of Austin Eckler, right? And so you're expecting like running back one numbers. Austin Eckler is still going to give you somewhere between like a mid to low end running back two performance. He's still that involved in the offense. So it's not exactly what you signed up for at the beginning of the year when you took him, but like, I can kind of see it already. Like when I go live this weekend, I'm gonna have people saying like, "Do I start Najee Harris or Austin Eckler?" And
You
it's
play
like,
Austin Eckler.
still play Austin Eckler. Don't get cute with that one.
Yeah, you don't need to get cute with Eckler. I think it's worth starting him still. The only two players that I think are really worth talking about, I don't really want to have anything to do with Josh Palmer this week. If Keenan Allen's out there, he's the one. Enough said. I don't want to get cute with these Chargers wide receivers. Gabe Davis and Dalton Kincaid. Because the matchup is phenomenal for Gabe Davis. Second most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers since week 10, the Los Angeles Chargers have 13.9 yards per reception. 9 touchdowns to wide receivers, as tied for the second most. You got the balls to play Gabe Davis in week 2 of the fantasy playoffs? I don't. I'll admit it. I don't got the stones to do that. I can't. On the chance he gooses you, I can't.
Yeah, no chance. I think, this could be a game where, Buffalo gets up big just because this isn't the same Chargers team that I think a lot of people expected to be here, right? I mean, it's very simply Easton Stick versus Josh Allen, right?
Yep.
And the other part of this too is that while the Chargers have been giving up a ton of points to receivers lately, it's been coming mainly from the slot. They're giving up about 73% of those fantasy points from the slot. So Gabe Davis, not a slot guy by any means. And that just adds more reason to not bet on him this week.
And then how about Dalton Kincaid? Because you and I are in agreement there. I don't want to get cute with Gabe Davis at all whatsoever. Chargers allowing the 11th most fantasy points to tight end since week 10. It's just not a great matchup. It's not a bad one. Whoa. What are you feeling on Dalton Kincaid? Part of me is like, fire him up because the tight end landscape is so dry and desolate. But at the same time, I think it really depends on your options. I'm not forcing him into my lineup. Maybe that's what I should just leave it at.
Yeah. I mean, the guy really since Joe Brady took over the play calling really hasn't done anything special, or at least like what we were seeing before then. But I think at this point, with how well he had been doing, you had signed on to him for the rest of the year. So you are probably in a spot where he's your only guy, and you may be looking at waivers and going like, well, Hunter Henry has put up back-to-back 19-point weeks.
Right.
I don't know if you get cute with that one too. So I would say you probably got to roll with Kincaid.
Let's move on. We got another more games to cover here. The Commanders, visit the New York Jets. Yeah, this is a disgusting game. This is an absolutely disgusting game. Is it bad that I think the Jets win this game?
No, they absolutely should. And if they don't,
I think this is a game they should win. Yeah. Look, I mean, your only obvious start in this game is Breece Hall. I know he gave you only 2.8 last week, but my gosh, the Washington Commanders defense is absolutely atrocious. Ever since they got rid of Chase Young and Montez Sweat at the trade deadline, this team has been awful on all fronts. The Commanders' 4th most fantasy points allowed to running back since week 10. 4.7 yards per carry. 4 receiving touchdowns. And even if they can't pass, but look, their secondary is atrocious as well. The Jets should be able to move the ball just fine, no matter how bad they are. The Jets should be able to move the football with how bad this Washington Commanders defense is. So I think you're playing Breece Hall. I think he is an obvious start this week. I don't want people to panic because Breece only gave you 2.8. You have to play him this week.
Yeah, I mean they're going to move the ball with Breece. They have to, and the Zach Wilson is injured. Let's see if he plays, because if he doesn't play, then I would have to think that's more work for Breece Hall then.
I would agree with that. Let's talk about the wideouts in this game because I think it's two polar opposite situations. You have Terry McLaurin coming off of an absolutely phenomenal game in week 15, and you have Garrett Wilson coming off one of his worst fantasy performances in week 15. However, the match for Garrett Wilson is absolutely phenomenal because the Commanders, they have allowed the third most fantasy points to wide receiver since week 10, a 71.3% catch rate. That is the second highest, the second most receiving yards allowed. 15 yards per reception. That is the third most. And another 9 receiving touchdowns. That is tied for the second most. I'm kind of like, F it, play Garrett Wilson this week. I think the matchup is there. If it is a Trevor Siemian, maybe it's a disgusting Allen Lazard 6-target game again. I really hope it isn't. But if it is Zach Wilson, you have to play Garrett Wilson then.
Yep, agreed.
Terry McLaurin, then the Jets, they have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers since week 10, the 10th fewest receiving yards allowed, and only 3 receiving touchdowns. I know we just had a hot game, but look, with Sam Howell and his recent struggles with how good this Jets secondary is, I'm sitting Terry McLaurin this week. I would much rather play Garrett Wilson with whoever they have at quarterback than Terry McLaurin this week.
I feel like Deontay Johnson is going to be like my litmus test for the week. And
that's a good litmus test, honestly.
And I feel the same as I did with Deontay Johnson, Tyler Boyd. Like, I would rather play Deontay Johnson than Terry McLaurin this week.
I might be in that same boat. But the Jets secondary is too good, and Sam Howell has been struggling. Brian Robinson, he didn't practice on Wednesday. Could be trending towards playing this week. Jets have allowed the 5th most fantasy points of running back second half of the year. They've been run on the most times, 167 during that span, and they've allowed the 6th most rushing yards as well. If B-Rob does play this week, do you have any interest? I'm kind of on the fence. First game back from injury. It's a hamstring injury. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a hand injury or a concussion, I would feel very, very good. But maybe you just gotta, you just gotta limit the expectations a bit. But because the matchup is there. That's the thing. The matchup is there, right, and he's going to get the work. So, like, do you really want to bet against it? You just got to maybe lower expectations a bit.
You want anything to do with Sam Howell this week with his struggles?
No, thanks. Well, yeah. No, I don't. No, I do not. Go ahead. He should be on your bench.
Sorry, I'm updating a portion of my doc here. Yeah, I think you probably have someone better if you have Sam Howell on your team. I gotta think you do. And Curtis Samuel, him or Tyler Boyd this week? Because I think that's your barometer for Curtis Samuel this week.
It is. No, I would still lean Tyler Boyd. It's do you want to face the Jets secondary or the Steelers secondary? And I would rather take the Steelers secondary matchup every time.
And I'm going to agree with you on that one. Let's keep it moving. The Lions visit the Minnesota Vikings. Look, this game could be fireworks, honestly. I think this has potential to be a high-scoring game. Now, I know Nick Mullins is the Minnesota Vikings quarterback, but in-division game to close out the season, everything's got to be thrown out on the field there. There's a ton of great plays in this game. You're obviously playing Jefferson. You're playing Hawkinson, Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're playing Sam Laporta. David Montgomery, he's still a must-start in your mind?
I think so. Because, I mean, we've been seeing that 10, 11, 12 fantasy points is still a pretty, is like a running back 20 performance, right? So it's still startable. It's not as great as it once was at the beginning of the year. But, again, with how bad running backs have been, I don't think you can really say, David Montgomery isn't really doing it for me, because who else is?
All it takes is for Monty to find the end zone, and that's turned on its head. All he has to do is score, which he has done more times than not this year. Mm-hmm. And he gives you an immediate fantasy relevant day. So I agree. I think Monty is still in your lineups. Let's talk about the Vikings offensive side of the ball. Jordan Addison and Ty Chandler. And let's start with Addison. 6 for 111 and 2 versus Cincinnati last week. Season best performance. And Detroit has just been getting smashed by wide receivers second half of the season. Most fantasy points allowed, 5th most out wide, 7th most allowed in the slot, the 4th most receiving yards, nearly 14 yards per reception. Excuse me. That's the 5th most. And hey, guess what? Guess how many touchdowns they've allowed, Ty?
9?
9. Another 9.
Hey, we played the bit. Yeah.
tied for the second most. I think Jordan Addison is a must start this week. I think he's got to be in your lineups. In a game that's a must win for the Minnesota Vikings, in a game where Nick Mullins was looking his way fairly frequently at home, I'm kind of digging Jordan Addison this week. My league winner, Jordan Addison.
I see. The tough thing is that I can't even really be complaining because I agree with you in the fact that you got to start him. I can't go as far as say must start because
fair.
It's Nick Mullins that we're talking about here, but
touche.
And we do have to. I'm going to be honest. Was it both touchdowns? No, it was both touchdowns to Jordan Addison against Cincinnati. Everything went right on those plays for the Vikings. Like
that doesn't happen 2 weeks in a row for the Vikings. It really doesn't.
It doesn't. So I get everything is there for Addison to have another good week. Maybe it's not 2 touchdowns on a buck 11 on yards too, but I think there's still enough for him to do some kind or to put up some kind of fantasy point.
Ty Chandler then. Look, I know you're going to want to play him.
Winner, Ty Chandler.
You sure about that though? 21st in fantasy points allowed to running backs since week 10. The Detroit Lions only 3.3 yards per carry allowed to running backs. That is the 3rd fewest. Are you like? I think a lot of people are going to want to fire up Ty Chandler again this week, and I think you might have a better option. I think you might have a better option. I think you might. Ty Chandler was a waiver wire pickup. I got to believe you have 2 running backs who have better matchups this week. And I don't. Ty Chandler feasted against the Cincinnati Bengals run defense. So we talked about hasn't been any good against running backs this year. They've allowed hyper efficient backs to toast them. And that's what Ty Chandler has been. So I got to think you have a better running back there. If you got to play him, you got to play him. I'm not there. I'm just not there in this matchup.
I think he's playable if you think that this game is going to be close in a defensive game. If you think that's going to be the game, then Ty Chandler is going to be the play. But if you think it's going to be a lot of yards, high scoring, then Ty Chandler probably isn't your play then.
If it is a high scoring game, Jared Goff is going to be involved. He is on the road this week. We always talk about road Goff. We got to avoid him. He's actually been fairly okay on the road this year. The big difference, though, is that he only has 9 touchdowns on the road versus 17 at home. Vikings have been fairly buttoned up. I mean, this Vikings defense has made strides of improvement over the second half of the season. The 5th fewest fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks since week 10. I think there's too many quarterbacks injured, though, to bench Jared Goff. And I think you're still going to play him this week again in a game that actually could be fairly high scoring. I'm also afraid this could be a game. I'm trying not to let like my hometown optimism ooze out of me for like the ounce of it that's left. But like, I kind of wonder if the Lions lay another egg this week.
I mean, we're looking at somewhere between like 13, 14 and 18 points. So probably fringe. He's a fringe play for me. I mean, you might have to if he's your only guy. Like one of my leagues, I've got Kyler Murray and Jared Goff. I'm leaning Jared Goff because Chicago has been much better against quarterbacks, much better than Minnesota has. So that's when I lean Goff. But like if I've got I don't know, I'm trying to think of it. Honestly, maybe this is the best way to say it. Jake Browning or Jared Goff. I'm leaning Jake Browning.
That one's a true coin flip for me there. I think you can be okay playing Jared Goff this week, but I think there's reason to have some pessimism this week. If you do have a start sit question, you can leave it down in the chat below. If you watched what used to be my start sit videos on Fridays, I don't know how Cameron does it anymore. He probably took away my whole thing of, if you leave a start sit question, make sure you answer someone else's as well. We want to be a community that does help each other win, but knowing Cameron, he probably ripped that away because he doesn't care anything about my traditions and what I do in my videos and what I do for us. It's okay, Cameron. You can be selfish. Thanks for editing this and posting this. Ty, let's take a quick break. We will be right back with more Week 16 start sit decisions. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We're going to dive into more start sit decisions for week 16. I nailed it that time. I didn't nail it on the transition there, but we nailed it on the way back in. Already covered Saints, Rams, Bengals, Steelers, Bills, Chargers, Commanders, Jets, Vikings, Lions. Now we're going to move on to the Cleveland Browns. They visit the Houston Texans this week. I think you are starting Amari Cooper and you are starting David Njoku. David Njoku has been too hot to sit. Now, unless if you have a guy like Travis Kelce, Samuel Porta, TJ Hawkinson, I think those are about the 3 only guys I'm really considering over David Njoku, because he has been so insanely hot.
Yep. I mean, career highs already in receptions, targets, yards, and touchdowns. We still have 3 games to go, and one of those games is against one of the best matchups on the year for tight ends.
It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm pulling up his stats, and I also have to sneeze. This is a very awkward moment. Look. There it is. Oh, my goodness. Literally the worst possible time. Part of me is like, do I try and mute myself? I'm like, nope, I'm on a different tab. I can't. Ready for this? I'm going to read you David Njoku's targets since week 7.
Hit me with it.
9, 8, 6, 9,
5.
15, 9, 6, 8, 14. He has 6 finishes inside of the top 10 tight ends, during that stretch. I mean, he has been phenomenal. You absolutely start him. No questions asked.
Do you remember?
Go for
real
it.
Quick. Do you remember when they signed Njoku to his extension? It was of 4 years, $56 million, and everyone's like, "What has the guy done?"
And he hadn't done anything.
Well, and he's making it worth every penny now.
He's doing stuff now. Let's talk about a few other pass catchers in this game, though. Let's start with the Houston Texans, because I really don't want to talk about the Cleveland Browns in this game. Nico Collins and Noah Brown. Sounds like Nico is going to suit up this week. Noah Brown last week did go 8 for 82 and 1. I have no interest in either of these guys. If Denzel Ward is on the field, I have no interest in either of them, and Nico is probably going to draw Denzel Ward in this game. Therefore, I have no interest in him. I really don't think it's worth taking a shot on him this week, unless if your other option is Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
Even at that, I might try and take a long shot on Gabe Davis, but I don't think I would get that cute. I would still play Nico, but I really don't want to play him if he's matched up with Denzel Ward this week, because Denzel Ward has been shut down. He has locked down almost anybody lined up across from him this year.
And it's probably going to be Case Keenum again this week. It sounds like CJ Stroud is very unlikely, so you've got that component with it. It's a tough look for these Texans wide receivers this week.
And yeah, if you're not going Nico, I assume you're also not going Noah Brown in that case.
Correct.
Devin Singletary and Jerome Ford. Let's talk about the running backs. Devin Singletary, Freaking 26 for 121 in week 15. Cleveland actually hasn't been as stout against running back since week 15, or since week 10, excuse me. 15th in fantasy points allowed to running backs during that stretch, 4.7 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns allowed. Any interest in Devin Singletary this week? Running back 2?
Probably not.
I feel like he's right on the cusp for me. He's he's right on that like running back 23 to 27 range.
Devin Singletary and Najee Harris.
Najee Harris.
There's more.
I was just gonna say that one's pretty easy for me.
Devin Singletary or Brian Robinson.
That one I'd play Devin Singletary. Brian Robinson off a hamstring concerns me, and that's even if he's up.
Devin Singletary or I probably know your answer, but Ty Chandler.
See, that's an interesting one. I think that one I'm going to play Singletary. The matchup is better. And I don't think Ty Chandler is going to get 22 rushing attempts again in this game.
Yeah.
I think it's very possible with Case Keenum at quarterback, Devin Singletary gets another 20 touches this game. I think that's totally possible. So I think I would play Singletary over Chandler this week.
Yeah. My one concern for Singletary is, if you remember, what was it, 2 weeks ago when it was Dameon Pierce that got more snaps and carries?
Yep.
Like, part of me is like, well, what if that happens again this week for whatever unknown reason, right? So feels like Devin Singletary is just like, what wide receiver did I say that about? Devin Singletary is the most volatile running back this week, because if he gets you 26 carries, he's going to do something with them. But if he doesn't, it's a dud. So it's few and far between, I should say it like that.
You said that about your buddy Deontay Johnson earlier in this episode.
Jerome
Ford, I'm not all that interested. Houston's been pretty good against running backs second half of the season, only allowing 3 yards per carry to backs. It's second fewest, excuse me. Only 1 rushing touchdown allowed. I really have no interest in Jerome Ford this week.
I mean,
I would rather play Devin Singletary and Ty Chandler over him.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty with Jerome Ford is that you're getting about 4 catches a game, so it's 4 fantasy points. But the concern is that in his last 4 games, he's only gotten 9, 9, 12, and 8 carries in those games. So it's like you're only getting 10 to 12 touches a game. That's not really worth starting, in my opinion.
Joe Flacco, stream of the week. Houston getting smoked by quarterbacks second half of the season. 3rd most fantasy points allowed, 2nd most passing yards, 2nd most air yards per game. And Joe Flacco's been hot, baby. I think he might be one of my favorite streaming plays of the week if you're really desperate at quarterback and Flacco is still out there.
I don't mind it. But
are you just worried the Browns are going to smoke the Texans though with no CJ Stroud?
Yeah, because I still can't get a read on this Houston team without CJ Stroud, because they played Tennessee last week. So it's like, it's not really the most like it's not the most I can't take a whole lot away from that game because it's Tennessee, and Tennessee has just not been that great this year. Cleveland is much, much better than Tennessee. So I don't have the greatest feeling about it for Houston. So maybe Cleveland can just run all over them and just run them out the stadium pretty much. But again, Houston has been giving up a ton of points to quarterbacks lately.
Yeah. I think I'm good playing Flacco. I think he's a borderline top 10 option, I think, at this point in the season, with how many quarterback injuries we have, the matchup, how he's been slinging it around recently. He's right on that tier for me.
I know there are going to be some Jordan Love truthers, or there are going to be some people.
No, I'm playing Flacco over Jordan Love this week.
Flacco over Jordan Love. Yes,
I agree. Let's move on to that matchup because it's really disgusting, and I really don't want to spend more than 2 minutes on it. I think Chuba Hubbard is the only player you can play in this matchup this week.
Correct.
I genuinely think that. I don't think you can play anybody else. Because Chuba, he's giving you 20, 22, 11.6, and 12.3 over the last 4 weeks. Now he gets Green Bay, 7th most fantasy points allowed to running backs over the second half of the season. this is a prime spot for him. Let me get Green Bay's yards per attempt because I know it's up there. They're allowing running backs to run for more than 5 yards per carry. I know Carolina's offensive line is terrible, but you know what? When a defense allows you to be that efficient, terrible offensive line play kind of it evens it out at least a little bit. But I think Chuba's the only player you can play in this matchup because Aaron Jones, first game back from injury last week, 13 carries, 4 receptions, 17 touches is nice, but man, you know what? Only 69 yards. Those touches. Nice. The matchup is there. I get it. Like, you can run on Carolina. Like, the way you beat Carolina is by the run. But here, Aaron Jones or Chuba Hubbard in this game?
Chuba Hubbard.
I think I'm playing Chuba. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I think it's Chuba.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can play Aaron Jones. I'm not excited to, though.
Yeah, that's a mid-low end running back too for me. I mean, because the current situation in Green Bay, it's really going to be him. And yes, 17 touches. So you know the touches are going to be there for him. He's just not going to do a whole lot with those touches, though. That's the only problem.
The Packers wide receiver, Panthers wide receivers, you want nothing to do with them. I don't think you can play Adam Thielen anymore.
No more. Nope.
Same with the Packers wide receivers. Christian Watson, he's still dealing with his hamstring. Jaden Reed, he hasn't practiced. He picked up an ankle injury in week 15. So, I mean, you're looking at Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Amari Toure, Malik Heath. What a pull from you in the doc. What a pull.
And can I also just say real quick, from your guys' last episode when you were talking about Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson. Tyler Goodson is an undrafted rookie free agent from the University of Iowa.
This is why Tyler joins us on the podcast. I wouldn't have been able to pull any of that for you all. Look, even without JC Horn, the Carolina secondary, they don't get thrown on because they don't need to. Teams can just beat Carolina through the run. So I'm not interested in Jordan Love. I'm not interested in any Packers player outside of Aaron Jones. And again, you're looking at him as a low-end running back 2 this week, probably. I think Chuba's the only guy you can confidently play this week and say, yeah, you know what? He's going to give me for sure running back 2 numbers this week. He is going to give me top 24 numbers. I don't think there's a way that he doesn't this week. Let's move on. Seattle takes on the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. DK Metcalf, you play him. Ken Walker. After last week against San Francisco, you play him.
Philly.
You agree?
Philly, yes.
Philly, excuse me. Thank you. Yeah. Against Philly, you play him. Cameron, I don't know why you put a question mark by Derrick Henry's name in this doc as an obvious start. I don't care that he only gave you 5 points last week. If you made Breece Hall biased individual, if you made Breece Hall a must start, Derrick Henry is a must start this week because my gosh, the Seattle Seahawks are once again a matchup you want to target. They have been dog water against running back second half of the season. They are one of the best matchups to target. So I know Derrick Henry gave you only 10 yards on freaking 20 touches last week. But you got to play him against the Seahawks, man. The matchup is too good at home.
I'm looking up some stats. Oh, Seattle's only averaging about 21 points a game. That plays right into Tennessee that they're going to be able to keep this game close, and that benefits Derrick Henry.
Let's talk about the Seattle wide receivers, though, in this game, outside of DK Metcalf. You got Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Tennessee, they've been a good matchup to target for wide receivers since week 10. The 8th most fantasy points allowed, 8th most out wide, 7th most in the slot, the 6th most receiving yards, and the 2nd most receptions. How confident are you in either? Here, let's start here. Who would you rather play, Tyler or JSN?
Hate this question. Hate it, because we've been asking this for the past 3 weeks.
My answer has remained the same in every episode, by the way.
Can I say neither? Just because I don't want to pick between the two. But I guess
you can play neither. I think that's fine. You can play neither.
I would rather play neither, but I'm going to lean JSN because at least I'm seeing some big playability out of JSN. Like, they're using him down the field quite a bit. So there's that. That's the intrigue for JSN. Really, for Tyler Lockett, is just like, can he get receptions? And
it's volume on his. It's receptions on the volume he's getting. That's exactly it. because he had double the amount of targets that JSN did last week, but JSN caught the touchdown, went for more yards than Tyler Lockett. And I'll take the guy who has big playability if you're forced to start one of them. Do you want to? Yep. Are they in flex territory for you? Here, we'll use the Tyler Boyd barometer. Tyler Boyd or either of these two.
I like JSN just a little bit better than Tyler Boyd, I think.
I do as well. As well.
But it's close. That's a coin flip probably for me. But
I would agree. I like JSN more than Tyler Boyd this week.
Yeah.
I also like Tyler Lockett better than Tyler Boyd this week.
That one's probably closer than JSN Tyler Boyd.
DeAndre Hopkins, Seattle, since week 10. I'm not a Seattle hater. Look, every time I bring up how bad the Seattle secondary has been, we always get torched in the comments. Oh, this guy, they hate the Seattle Seahawks. I'm reading you stats. I think your secondary is talented. I think Devon Witherspoon is talented.
It's a dog.
I think your entire secondary is so talented. Tariq Woolen, he's talented. But man, when you give up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receiver since week 10, the 2nd most of the slot, the 8th most receiving yards and receptions, what am I supposed to tell you? That your secondary is really, really good? DeAndre Hopkins, you want to play him this week? Any interest? I think I'd flex him.
The question, DeAndre Hopkins with Ryan Tannehill, does that make a difference for you? Because Will Levis is dealing with his ankle injury.
That is true. No, I don't think it really does. Okay, I'll say this. It makes a difference, but I would rather play him over Deontay Johnson with Mason Rudolph.
Huh. Because the other part of this, too, is that if we think this plays into Derrick Henry, what is there then for DeAndre Hopkins? I don't know if that's, the right way to ask that question, because I think you can still see 9-10 targets for DeAndre Hopkins with Derrick Henry still getting 20 carries. So maybe actually here's probably the question, honestly. JSN or DeAndre Hopkins?
JSN.
That's kind of where I'm at too.
I think I'd play JSN over DeAndre Hopkins this week. I know the matchup is there, but again, Seattle has just been so bad against the run that I would much rather target that. That seems kind of crazy to say, but you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go double check DeAndre Hopkins' box score to make sure I don't sound asinine right now, because part of me feels like I'm missing something there, and I actually should be choosing DeAndre Hopkins. Because look, it's not like DeAndre Hopkins has been bad. He 18.9, 25.4 in weeks 13 and 14. 12 targets, 9 targets. Again, I know it's with Will Levis, but I take that back. I would rather play DeAndre Hopkins over JSN. I'll play the volume there and the big playability. I think it's still there. I know it's not explosive, but I think it can still be there. So I would rather play D-Hop over JSN.
I get that.
Let's move on, though. We got a whole heck of a lot more games to cover and not enough time to chat about all of them. And I don't want to spend any time talking about this Indianapolis-Atlanta game, so we're going to skip over it. Just kidding. Nobody is a must-start in this game. Nobody is a lineup lock. The only one is Jonathan Taylor if he comes back.
But even then, coming back from injury against Atlanta,
I also take that back. Bijan Robinson, you have to play as well. Look, I know it's 0.8. I know it's 0.8. Okay, I know. And I know Arthur Smith is an idiot head loser brain. I know he is.
Forever and always.
But the Colts, 10th in rush yards allowed second half of the season. Top 10 in rush attempts against. They're allowing 10.1 yards per reception to running backs. That is the most. And Bijan Robinson can thrive in the passing game. I think it's an exploitable matchup for Bijan Robinson. It's a matter of, will Arthur Smith do it? But for how good Bijan Robinson has been, when you lose to the Carolina Panthers and you don't give Bijan Robinson the touches after he fumbled, I find it really hard to believe Arthur Smith isn't going to feed him this week. He has to. I know the Atlanta Falcons claimed his job is secure, but when you lose to the team that should have the overall pick this year, and that's a pretty fireable offense after you sat your superstar for fumbling one time. I think you have to play Bijan still.
Yeah. Josh Norris over on the Underdog Fantasy Football Show. Yep. He's a great follow, by the way. On
wonderful follow. He's one of my favorite follows on Twitter.
Amen. He tweeted out last week before the Panthers Atlanta game, and he said, Panthers played base defense at the highest rate in the NFL, or played base defense in week 14. That would have been week 14. Falcons typically face a base defense at 33% of snaps, and Smith prefers Algier in those looks. And now this week against the Colts play their base defense on just 18% of snaps. That's a defense that I think Arthur Smith, if that is true, and it played out that way this past week, that's certainly exploitable for Bijan to take advantage of.
Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Let's talk about the Colts wide receivers. They've been buttoned up. Second fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, third fewest receiving yards, third fewest receptions. I kind of don't care because Michael Pittman is a volume play. I think he's still in your lineups. Josh Downs, I'm not interested in though.
Nope. No. Well,
let's leave it.
Yeah. I was going to say,
let's leave it at that.
Yeah. We don't need to.
If Michael Pittman plays, this is true. If Michael Pittman plays, even if he doesn't,
I still don't have much.
I'm still not that interested in Josh Downs. No, yeah. I agree with you on that. Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Yeah, no. Don't even try and make an argument.
Even with Taylor Heineke?
No, stop. Muted. Where's my mute button for you? I can't find it. Wide receiver since week 10 though. Oh, can you believe this? Third fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, fourth fewest receiving yards, second fewest receptions. Can you believe that?
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah, don't play either of them. Let's move on to Jacksonville. They visit the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You are playing Rachaad White. You are playing Mike Evans. You are playing Travis Etienne. You are playing Evan Ingram. All these guys are top 10 at their positions. You start them, no questions asked. Don't get cute. Let's talk about the wideouts, though, because this is where it gets interesting in this game. Calvin Ridley and Chris Godwin. This is where it gets really, really interesting. Because Calvin Ridley, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spew the numbers, and I'm going to abstain from giving you an opinion, because every time I put my faith in Calvin Ridley, he rips my heart out from me, and I no longer want to play this game with Calvin Ridley. But here you go. 12 and 13 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Tampa Bay, second half of the season, 12th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, the third most receiving yards, third most receptions. Only 2 receiving touchdowns, though. So you lose the touchdown upside with Calvin Ridley. And Tampa Bay on the season, they are allowing 6.3 more fantasy points to wide receivers over expectation. That is per Josh Larkey. I got that off of the X social media site from over at the 33rd team. Josh Larkey. Fun stat that I pulled out for this bit. You're playing Calvin Ridley. I abstain.
I plead the fifth.
Okay. I think that tells you how much confidence we have in Calvin Ridley. The matchup is there. If you got to play him, you got to play him. Would you rather play him or Chris Godwin? Because Chris Godwin, coming off season best, 10 for 155. In Jacksonville, they're consistently ninth most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, ninth most to the slot, ninth in receiving yards allowed, 13.7 yards per reception is ninth. Only thing they aren't ninth in 68% catch rate, which is tied for the 5th highest. Try to play him or Chris Godwin, Ridley or Chris Godwin.
I would have a little more hope if Chris Godwin played the slot as often as he did before Dave Canales came into town. I would probably go Calvin Ridley over Chris Godwin still. I feel like I need to see another week of Chris Godwin doing, good work. I can't just base everything off of 1 week with Chris Godwin at this point.
I think I'd rather play Calvin Ridley as well. I don't want to trust Chris Godwin for 1 week. He just hasn't been consistent enough all year. Last starter sit for this game, because we got to keep it moving. Baker Mayfield. Look, quarterback 2 finished in week 15. Jacksonville, they are allowing the most fantasy points to quarterback since week 10. Ty, I know I had a name game in here for you, but due to time here, I think we got to cut it, unfortunately. I know you're
let's go.
You're super bummed about that.
Oh,
super
man. Bummed. Dude, that's such a bummer for everyone listening.
We're going to accelerate it instead. Would you play Baker Mayfield? Would you play Baker Mayfield over any of these quarterbacks? Jordan Love, Sam Howell, Joe Flacco, Jake Browning, Jared Goff, or Kyler Murray?
Oh, is it crazy to say I actually lean that I would start Baker Mayfield over maybe half of those guys?
No, not at all. I would play him over Jordan Love. I'd play him over Howell. I would seriously consider it over Goff and Browning. I mean, it's like Joe Flacco and Kyler Murray, and the only reason why I would consider Kyler Murray is because of his rushing ability. But in reality, I would for sure play him over Jordan Love and Sam Howell, and probably I would even lean Jake Browning.
Yeah, it feels like Baker Mayfield does a lot better against zone coverages than he does against man coverages.
Sure.
Green Bay played a lot of zone. You know who plays zone even more than Green Bay?
Lay it on me.
The Jacksonville Jaguars.
So, but yeah, Baker has a really high chance of feasting this week. I think he might actually have a really, really good week.
And so now saying that, he's only going to put up 8 fantasy points.
Oh yeah. Don't start Baker now because we said that. Look, if you need a guy, I think Baker is a really good option this week, though.
Yeah.
Dallas and Miami. Dallas visits Miami, Florida to take on the Dolphins. Even despite a down week, you play Dak, you play CD, you play Tony Pollard. You're obviously playing Tyreek if he's out there, still dealing with an injury, but you're playing him no matter what. You're playing Jalen Waddle. Mm-hmm. You're playing Raheem Mostert.
Yep.
How about Devon Achane? I mean, seeing how bad this Dallas Cowboys defense was in week 15. I mean, they're middle of the pack against running back since week 10. They're allowing 4.8 yards to the position. That's 5th most.
Keep stalling. I'm kidding.
I'm not sold on Achane, man.
Yeah.
I'm not forcing him in if I don't have to, because Raheem is the one. They're both slapped with questionable tags right now as of this recording, but I think Raheem Mostert is still the one right now.
I mean, the most concerning thing for Achane is the fact that this isn't a split backfield. Like when we say that Raheem Mostert is the one, he is the running back one, and it is very heavily favored towards Raheem Mostert. And sure, Achane can make the most unlimited touches. We've seen that already this year. Only problem is just that when he's on the field, they're not really like rushing the ball with him. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough for me at this point to say that Achane is someone that you got to play, because where's the upside if he's not going to get the touches that we kind of want him to get?
I mean, the pendulum could swing back where Achane is actually, the one this week. It could totally swing back his direction. I'm not going to force him into my lineup if I don't have to.
Can you imagine if that happens? Like it
will. It will. It happened last year with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. They go back and forth. Man. They go back and forth. It's like we never knew which one to actually play. One of them would have a great week. The other one wouldn't. So I'm still going to lean. I'm not going to force Achane into my lineup, but I don't think he's a bad start either. Tua, is he a must start this? I feel like he's not. I feel like I got too many question marks with him.
Baker Mayfield or Tua Tagovailoa?
See, I'm going to play Tua because I do think there's a chance Baker just absolutely craps the bet. I think that's like, I know Tua could as well, but Tua could also be 21 of 28 and throw for 241 in this game and give you at least 15. I think both could give you like 8. I don't think I'm willing to get that cute with Tua at home.
That makes sense.
Jake Ferguson, here's what I'll say about him. If he gets 8 targets in this game, he's going to be a top 12 tight end. If he doesn't get 8 targets, he's not going to be. And Miami is allowing the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends since week 10. I'm not forcing Jake Ferguson in if I don't have to, if I have another option.
Yeah, if I've got another option, I'm going with the other option. But if he's the only guy I got, I'm still rolling.
Arizona visits the Chicago Bears. Look, I don't even want to talk about this game. I know I've said that about a few matchups, but I mean, really, Justin Fields, Trey McBride, James Conner, DJ Moore. You're playing them this week, especially after James Conner, what he did against San Francisco last week. I think he's still playing against Chicago, even though Chicago has improved as a run defense. I think you play Kyler Murray. I know it hasn't been good. I still think you do. I think you do. It depends. So you're going to have Kyler Murray or a Baker Mayfield. You're going to have Kyler Murray or a Jake Browning. Kyler Murray or Joe Flacco. I think there's a reason why I had Kyler Murray in that mix with Baker Mayfield.
Mhm.
And I think there's a reasonable argument for any of those guys. I'm just telling you, I would lean Kyler in this matchup. I just would. I know Chicago has been good against fantasy quarterbacks, but I'm just going to take the mobility. I'm going to. That's my only argument. Could you start any? Yeah, you could start Baker Mayfield over him this week. I wouldn't blame you if you did. I'm telling you, I'm going to lean Kyler Murray's rushing ability.
Let's look at his rushing stats over the last couple of weeks. 20 yards, 49 yards. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's what it really comes down to. Chicago has been better against quarterbacks lately. But none of those guys have a rushing upside. I shouldn't say rushing upside. You're getting free points with Kyler Murray's mobility. None of those guys have the same thing.
If you want to play Flacco, Jake Browning, Baker Mayfield over Kyler, go ahead, do it. I have no problem with you doing that.
Just don't come crying to us when...
Right. I didn't tell you to not play any of those guys or to absolutely play Kyler Murray. I'm just telling you I would lean Kyler, but you go ahead and play any of those guys over him. I'm sorry, we're not talking about Cole Kmet. I think you do play him, but he's not one that I want to spend any time on.
Yeah, Arizona's tough, but you're probably at a point with Cole Kmet, just like you are with a Dalton Kincaid, where you're like, this is my only guy.
Sunday Night Football. What a beautiful Sunday Night Football game. The New England Patriots, Denver Broncos. Hey, if you got the Denver Broncos defense on your team, you better play them this week. I'll tell you that right now. If Ramondre plays, you play him. If he doesn't, Ezekiel Elliott is a must start. Simple as that.
Yeah. Well, what injury is Ramondre coming back from again?
Ankle, I believe. He's a high ankle sprain. And it sounds like he's still not practicing this week. So I don't believe you're going to have Ramondre Stevenson this week.
So Zeke is one of the best running back plays this week.
I would agree with that statement. I'm pulling up Ramondre Stevenson's report here right now. Yeah, he remains out of practice this week on Wednesday. So I would count on not having Ramondre.
I feel it's surprising to me that they haven't shut him down at all this year. Like, they are so far out of it. Just shut him down.
They should just shut him down. There's no reason to bring him back. Hunter Henry, he's been the tight end for each of the last 2 weeks. And I think you play him this week against Denver because they are atrocious against tight ends. The most fancy points allowed to the position second half of the season. They bleed points. Hunter Henry, I think, is a phenomenal play. I'd play him over Dalton Kincaid, who is the guy we were just talking about. I'd play him over Cole Kmet.
Here's a question for you. Are you ready for this one?
Yep.
Hunter Henry, or a guy that we'll talk about later in one of the Christmas Day games, George Kittle.
I'm playing George Kittle.
Fascinating.
I'm playing George Kittle. I know it's against Baltimore. I'm still going to play Kittle there. I don't think I got the stones to get that cute with Hunter Henry. I'll just admit that. Broncos players, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton. I'm not too interested in Javonte. Nope. But yet, desperate times call for desperate measures. With how banged up running backs are, you're probably going to play him as a running back too. But
that's just a tough break if that's your situation.
Right. It really is. I think you play Cortland Sutton, though, if he scores a touchdown, which is pretty likely. I think he has a good chance of being relevant this week. And you look at wide receivers lined up out wide. The Patriots, they 10th most fantasy points lined up to wide receivers lined up out wide in the second half of the season. I'm game to play Cortland Sutton this week if you need to in the flex. Cortland Sutton or DeAndre Hopkins? There it is.
No.
There it is.
No.
There it is. Found it. DeAndre Hopkins for me.
Cortland Sutton.
And I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
Well, I don't actually. I will say neither. Not JSN, not Tyler Lockett, not DeAndre Hopkins, not Cortland Sutton. I'm just going to bench all my wide receivers at that point.
I don't want to have to make a decision.
Exactly.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the Christmas Day games. Kansas City and Vegas. Here we go. You're playing Mahomes. You're playing Kelsey. You're playing Devontae Adams. You're playing Rashee Rice, who has been on fire. He is this year's Amon-Ra St. Brown. If Isaiah Pacheco suits up, you are playing him. And if Josh Jacobs suits up, you're playing him. If Zamir White, let's say both Pacheco and Josh Jacobs are inactive, I think you play Zamir White. Who are you taking out of CEH or Jerick McKinnon?
CEH.
I would agree.
He's the one that's getting the touches.
Everyone outside of that, I'm not too interested in. Jacoby Myers, not really.
Nah.
Let's move on. That's because that's literally that game. It's as simple as that. Let's not get cute with it. The Giants, they visit the Philadelphia Eagles. You're playing Hurts. You're playing A.J. Brown. You're playing Devonta Smith. You're playing Dallas Goedert. Because you're not going to get cute, you're going to play Saquon. But, man, I do not like this matchup for Saquon at all whatsoever. DeAndre Swift, though, we got to talk about him because Swift, his last 4 games, it has not been good. It has not been good at all whatsoever. 14 for 80 against Buffalo, 6 for 13 against San Francisco, 11 for 39 against Dallas, 18 for 74 against Seattle. The other thing about DeAndre Swift, let's look at the fantasy points then. He's only scored more than 10 fantasy points once in his last 6 games. 9.4, 19.7, there you go, but he scored a touchdown. Caught 3 passes for 31 yards in that game as well. 9.4 in week 12, 4, 3.9, 9.5 last week. I still prefer DeAndre Swift to Saquon Barkley this week.
I do too. I was just thinking about this while you were reading that off. I'm going to get a little controversial here. You wonder why the running back market is so just rock bottom right now in terms of just money for running backs. It's because of a play called the tush push, and DeAndre Swift is suffering from it because they're just running it with all these 3rd and 1s that Philly keeps on getting into. That's what, like 5-6 touches a game that they're taking away from DeAndre Swift. Like it's stupid. I get why they do it, but it's stupid. And yes, Swift probably has the better matchup, but golly, it's not been great because for whatever reason, they're just like, no, we want Jalen Hurts to just do literally everything. Throw, run, and catch the ball too. Like, I don't get it.
You look at Saquon Barkley's last 5 too. I know I talked about both of them. Week 10 against Dallas, the running back 37 against Washington, the running back 1 on the week. Week 12 against New England, the running back 45. Green Bay, the running back 4. New Orleans, running back 45. So if he faces a stout run defense, tough sledding for Saquon Barkley, and this is one of those matchups. I know Ken Walker had his way with the Eagles defense, but this Giants team is not even close to the Seattle Seahawks right now, and that's kind of crazy considering the Seattle Seahawks are fighting for playoff contention. They're not, one of the lethal team. They aren't as lethal of a team as they were last year. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it was before the Philly-Seattle game. I think Saquon was a sit, but after how Philly performed against Seattle and how well Kenneth Walker did against them,
you still have to play Saquon.
That puts Saquon back into my lineup, but it's not going to be great.
It's not going to be great. Here we go. Last, I don't want to talk about Darren Waller really. I wouldn't play. I don't think you force him. I'd play Hunter Henry over Darren Waller.
Yes, correct.
Monday Night Football. The Baltimore Ravens visit the San Francisco 49ers. Our last game that will blow through here. You play Lamar. You play Brock Purdy. You play Debo. You play Christian McCaffrey. You play Kittle. Maybe you don't play Kittle. You play Ayuk. Zay Flowers. I sneaky leg Zay Flowers this week.
Why is that?
I mean, the 49ers, they're giving up points to the wide receiver position. The second half of the season, they're about middle of the pack, but you look up, what was the stat I pulled up? Fantasy points out wide. I know Zay is mostly in the slot. They give up a lot of points to wide receivers lined up out wide. So that does favor OBJ. Sorry, I'm tearing away from Zay Flowers a little bit here.
If I'm not, I'm gonna confirm that. I think Zay actually plays more out wide than he does in the slot. But
Does he
don't quote
really?
me on that. I'm gonna look that up.
You look that up quick, but I mean, Zay has been the guy. He has been the lead target guy in this Baltimore Ravens back wide receiver room without Mark Andrews. I know it was bad last week, only 2 targets, but 8 and 10 the 2 weeks prior. Nobody wanted to win that game against Jacksonville. Baltimore was just kind of like, all right, I guess if you're not going to play up to the standards of needing to win, I guess we'll take it. But I think Zay bounces back this week. I'm willing to play him against San Francisco. I'd play him over DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. Wow. That's okay. You ready for this?
Yep.
Zay Flowers plays in the slot 34% of the time.
Really?
He plays out wide 64% of the time.
Really? His ADOT is so low to be playing outside that low or that much.
Probably all wide receiver screens and
that's
stuff like that.
Touche. Gus Edwards.
Yeah.
Sorry. Did you have anything more you're gonna add on Zay Flowers?
I was just gonna say I agree with you. Like I like him better than DeAndre Hopkins, like him better than JSN, but I just still don't feel great about it because there's a world where San Francisco literally wins this game like 41-10 or something like that. And you're just like,
it's not impossible.
That was rough.
Debatably the 2 best teams in the NFL right now, though, record wise, they are. But
this is Super Bowl preview. I'll be honest.
There we go. Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell up for the year. He gets lead duties back this year. James Conner had a nice little day against San Francisco last week. You have any interest in Gus Edwards this week?
Gus Edwards is not the. I really don't.
I don't either. I get if you need a guy though. If you went 0 RB and you need a guy, I'm.
Are you speaking to yourself here?
Yeah, I am. I am. Just kidding. I'm playing Chuba and Kyron in that league. Not when I drafted freaking Cam Akers and I blocked that out of my memory. Who was my other running back? Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. That's who it was.
Oof.
When drafted those 2 as my starting running backs. That didn't go too well.
Oof.
I've been thriving. I'm playing for the chip in that league. To go to the chip, baby. On the backs of Chuba and Kyron. Jamar Chase done for the year, though. Isaiah Likely, tight end 3, tight end 5 the last 2 games. He's had at least 5 receptions, 6 targets, and 70 yards. And hey, you know what? Second half of the season, 49ers, 8th in fantasy points allowed to tight ends. I think Isaiah Likely could have himself another nice little week here if San Francisco is playing from behind. Or Baltimore, excuse me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And there you have it. All the start-sit decisions you need to make in Week 16 of fantasy football. If you have a start-sit question, you can leave it down in the comment section below. But if you do, make sure you answer someone else's. We want to be a community that helps each other win championships. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, Tyler_Plath for Tyler, excuse me. You can follow the main page, FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook, here on YouTube and TikTok as well. If you're not subscribed to the podcast or the YouTube channel, make sure you do that and make sure you turn on those notifications as well so you know when all of our new episodes are up, when all of our new videos are up every single week, every single day. You're not going to want to miss out on any content. We're ramping down for the season, but really, we're releasing content all off season long as well. So make sure you stay tuned to get all of that content.
If you like the NFL draft,
oh, we got plenty of that coming for you.
This is your place. Place.
Got plenty of that coming for you as well. Again, be on the lookout. We will have content released for you throughout Christmas. We will not have a waiver wire video next Monday, though, because it is Christmas Day. We're taking the day off. We won't have a waiver wire video prior to Week 17. Our apologies there. Keep an eye out for a podcast episode. We may or may not have that. Tyler will be going live on Saturday, it sounds like.
Hey, and I just Saturday. Yes. More than likely Saturday than Sunday, but Saturday.
Yes. So there you go. You can keep your eye out for Tyler going live those days as well on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. Hey, you know what? Have a happy holiday. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you all out there. We'll be traveling for the holiday. So if you are traveling as well, stay safe, stay healthy this holiday season. Enjoy the time with your family. Enjoy the holiday spirits. We hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Until we see you all next time, stay safe. Once again, stay healthy. We'll see you all soon. Deuces.
Merry Christmas.